We're going to dive into something really deep, a powerful connection that ties together our history, our very biology, and the spiritual practices that might just be the key to healing it all. So let me ask you this. Have you ever felt this sadness or this heavy weight on your shoulders that you just can't explain? Like it doesn't connect to anything in your own life. It feels like it belongs to someone or something else. But maybe for you, it's more of a physical thing, like a sudden chill that just washes over you for no reason, a jolt of anxiety that comes out of the blue, a feeling that just seems ancient. Well, if any of that sounds familiar, you're definitely not alone. And believe it or not, there's a scientific reason for it. All right, so where in the world does this feeling, this ancestral echo, actually come from? Well, to really get it, we have to travel back in time, back to a moment in history that didn't just scar our culture, but it literally left a mark on our DNA. It all starts with the unimaginable trauma of the transatlantic slave trade. We're talking about famine, terror, a level of dehumanization that's hard to even comprehend. Scientists have a term for this, a profound environmental insult. It's an event so extreme that it fundamentally changes the biology of the people who lived through it, and, as it turns out, the biology of their descendants. The science that explains this is called epigenetics. Now, to be clear, it doesn't actually change your core DNA sequence. Instead, it changes how your body reads your DNA. The best way to think about it is like your ancestors' experiences left little sticky notes all over your genetic code. And those notes, that biological memory of what they went through, can be passed down through generations. And here's the part that is just wild. It's so efficient that a single traumatic event can directly impact 3 generations, all at the same time. Let me show you how that's even possible. So, picture a pregnant enslaved woman. She's generation 0, the S0, experiencing the trauma firsthand. Now her unborn child, that's generation 1, the F1, is literally developing in a room flooded with her stress hormones. That's programming its own stress response system before it's even born. But here's the kicker. Inside that tiny fetus are the very early germ cells, the eggs, that will one day create the 3rd generation. And those cells are being altered too. Boom, one event, 3 generations marked all at once. So, okay, we get the theory, but what does this biological shadow actually look like in practice, today? How does a trauma from centuries ago actually show up in our bodies right now? Well, it shows up in some very real ways. You see something called HPA axis dysregulation. Just think of that as your body's fight or flight control panel. For our ancestors, that panel was cranked up to 11, 24/7. Generations later, the system has basically crashed from overuse. It can look like hypervigilance, like an ancestral alarm clock that's stuck in the on position, because for them, being relaxed could literally get you killed. All of this can bubble up as anxiety, those sudden waves of emotion, and even metabolic problems. And it's not just passed down through mothers. New research shows that trauma actually changes the microRNA in sperm, meaning fathers pass on these adaptations too. And this is probably the most important point I want you to hear. If you experience these things, the anxiety, the hypervigilance, it is not a character flaw. It's not a weakness in your personality. It is a biological adaptation. It's a survival mechanism your ancestors' bodies built to help them enjoy the impossible. Now, I know this all sounds really heavy, almost like we're doomed to carry this forever, but we're not. This is where the story takes a turn, from trauma to healing. Because here's the thing, just as that code was written onto our genes, it can be rewritten. And what's amazing is that science is finally starting to catch up with what spiritual traditions have known all along. The scientific term for this healing process is environmental enrichment. It sounds fancy, but all it really means is that when you intentionally create a safe, positive, and stimulating environment for yourself, you can actually reverse the effects of inherited trauma. You can peel off those old epigenetic sticky notes. They are not permanent. And this is where it all clicks into place. Look at this. Science finds that trauma wires our brains for helplessness. But what do spiritual practices like hoodoo and other African traditional religions do? They use ritual to create a feeling of power and agency. Science tells us our brains are built to simulate others to learn from them. Ancestor veneration allows you to simulate and draw from their resilience, not just their trauma. Science shows us fear is a conditioned response. These spiritual practices use specific scents and sounds to recondition the nervous system for a feeling of safety. They're basically 2 different languages describing the exact same process of healing. And let's just focus on that sensory part for a second. Our sense of smell is incredibly powerful. It's hardwired directly to the parts of our brain that handle memory and emotion. So when practices use specific herbs, roots, or incense, they're not just doing something symbolic. They're engaging in a kind of neurospiritual rewiring. You are literally overwriting an inherited smell of fear with a new, intentional smell of power. So with all of this in mind, the big question becomes, how do you know if your lineage is trying to get your attention? How do you start to recognize these signals in your own life? Let's think of it as a kind of unified checklist. Remember that physical feeling we talked about at the beginning, that weight or that chill? That could be an epigenetic trigger firing. What about recurring dreams of these figures giving you advice or comfort? That could be your brain processing generations of data while you sleep. Or how about patterns? Are you noticing that you're hitting the exact same wall that your mother or your grandmother hit? That might be a generational invitation, calling on you to be the one to finally heal it. Or maybe it's just a subtle pull, a sudden curiosity about certain roots or rhythms or rituals. That's your biology seeking out its own environmental enrichment. To really bring this all home, I want you to think about it with this analogy. Imagine your entire lineage is running a massive relay race that stretches all the way through history. Your ancestors, who endured the unimaginable, they were forced to run their leg of the race carrying this impossibly heavy backpack filled with rocks. The rocks of trauma, the rocks of fear, the rocks of those dysregulated stress hormones. And they couldn't just stop and take it off. They had to survive. So they passed that backpack to the next runner, who passed it to the next, who eventually passed it to you. So when you feel that anxiety, when you feel that ancient weight, that is not your ancestors trying to haunt you. Not at all. That is them standing on the sidelines of the racetrack, pointing at the backpack you're still carrying. And they are shouting. They're cheering you on. They're saying, hey, look, you are finally in a safe enough place. You have the chance to take the backpack off. You can unpack those rocks and maybe even use them to build something beautiful, like an altar. The science shows us it's possible to heal, and spiritual traditions like hoodoo give us the roadmap, the actual techniques you can use to finally set that weight down. For the only question left is, how will you begin?